The hidden pain of people who understand too much. There is a strange kind of loneliness that almost no one talks about. Not the loneliness of having no one around. Not the loneliness of being rejected, ignored, or forgotten. But the loneliness of seeing things too clearly. The loneliness of noticing the tone behind someone's words, the hesitation behind a smile, the pattern behind a repeated behavior, the quiet contradiction between what people say and what they actually do. And for some people, this is not something they choose. Their minds simply do not stop at the surface. They listen to a conversation, but they also hear the insecurity underneath it. They walk into a room, but they immediately sense the tension no one has mentioned. They watch people make the same emotional mistakes over and over again, and part of them wants to speak, to warn, to explain, but another part already knows. Most people do not want clarity. They want comfort. And that is where the pain begins. Because people who understand too much often live with a mind that feels both like a gift and a burden. It helps them read situations quickly. It helps them solve problems before others even notice there is a problem. It helps them connect ideas, predict outcomes, and understand why people behave the way they do. But the same mind that sees deeply also carries deeply. And that kind of awareness can become exhausting. Today, we are going to explore the hidden psychological weight carried by people who understand too much. Not because they are better than others. Not because they are trying to sound different. But because their inner world often moves faster, deeper, and heavier than the world around them. And once you understand this pattern, you may finally be able to name something you have been feeling for years. The first struggle is emotional overdetection. This is when your mind picks up more emotional information than you know what to do with. Someone says, "I'm fine," but you can feel they are not fine. Someone compliments you, but something in their tone feels slightly forced. Someone acts calm, but their silence feels loud. Too much people then noticed. But to someone who understands too much, they become mental puzzles. Why did they say it like that? Why did their energy change? Did I do something wrong? Are they hiding something? Is there a problem no one wants to name? This is not just overthinking, it is overperceiving. The mind receives more signals than it can easily organize. And when you notice too much, peace becomes harder to protect. You can be sitting at dinner, smiling, nodding, acting completely normal, while your mind is silently mapping every shift in the room. Who feels left out? Who is pretending? Who is irritated but hiding it? Who needs help but will never ask? And by the end of the night, everyone else says that was nice, but you feel tired without knowing why. Because your mind was not just present, it was working. The second struggle is the burden of predicting consequences. Some people make decisions and only think about what they want right now. But people who understand too much often see the emotional chain reaction before it happens. They know how one careless sentence can damage trust. They know how one ignored problem can become resentment. They know how one repeated excuse can turn into a pattern. This makes them careful, sometimes too careful. They think before speaking, then they think about how their words might sound. Then they think about how someone might interpret those words based on their mood, past wounds, or insecurity. And suddenly, a simple conversation feels like walking through a room full of glass. This is why people who understand too much may appear quiet, not because they have nothing to say, but because they have already imagined 5 different ways the conversation could go wrong. They are not afraid of speaking. They are aware of impact. And awareness can make even simple choices feel heavy. Should I tell the truth and risk hurting them? Should I stay silent and protect the peace? Should I explain myself, or will that make it worse? Should I let it go, or will this become a pattern? To an outside observer, this may look like indecision. But inside, it is not emptiness. It is too much information, too many angles, too many possible outcomes, too much understanding. The third struggle is feeling disappointed by shallow connection. This one is quiet, but it can hurt deeply. People who understand too much usually do not crave attention as much as they crave depth. They do not just want someone to talk to. They want someone who can meet them beneath the surface, someone who hears the question behind the question, someone who can sit inside a real conversation without rushing to escape it. But many social spaces are built around performance. People talk, but they do not reveal. They laugh, but they do not connect. They share opinions, but they hide their fears. And when you are someone who naturally looks for meaning, this can make ordinary interaction feel strangely empty. You may be surrounded by people and still feel unseen. Not because they dislike you, not because they are cruel, but because they are living at a level of conversation where only a small part of you can show up, so you learn to adapt. You become funny enough to blend in, simple enough to avoid making people uncomfortable, quiet enough to not seem intense, easygoing enough to not reveal how much you actually notice. And over time a painful split, the version of you that people know, and the version of you that rarely gets invited into the room. That is why some of the most perceptive people can also feel the most alone. They are not lonely because no one speaks to them. They are lonely because so few people truly reach them. The fourth struggle is carrying truths people are not ready to hear. There are moments when you can see exactly what is happening. You can see that someone is repeating the same destructive relationship pattern. You can see that a friend is confusing attention with love. You can see that a family member is avoiding responsibility by blaming everyone else. You can see that a person is not angry because of what happened today, but because of something they never healed from years ago. And the painful part is this: you may be right, but being right does not mean someone is ready. That is one of the hardest lessons for people who understand too much. Truth without timing can feel like an attack. Insight without permission can feel like judgment. And clarity given to someone who is not ready for it can create distance instead of healing. So you begin to hold things in. You notice, but you do not always speak. You understand, but you do not always explain. You see the pattern, but you wait. And waiting can feel lonely, because inside your mind, the picture is already clear, but outside, everyone else is still arguing over the pieces. This can make you feel older than your age, not physically, emotionally, as if your mind has had to mature in places where others are still asleep, and that is not arrogance, it is exhaustion. The fifth struggle is the guilt of seeing through people. This may be one of the most uncomfortable parts. People who understand too much often feel guilty for noticing things they were not supposed to notice. They can sense when someone is being fake. They can feel when kindness is being used as a strategy. They can tell when someone is performing humility, exaggerating pain, hiding envy, or using charm to control the room. And because they see it, they may feel bad for seeing it. They may ask themselves, am I being too judgmental? Am I reading too much into this? Why can't I just take things at face value like everyone else? But the truth is, perception is not the same as cruelty. Noticing is not the same as condemning. Sometimes your mind is not trying to criticize people. It is trying to understand them. But when you understand motives too quickly, relationships can become complicated. You may forgive people, but you cannot unsee them. You may still care about them, but you no longer believe the version they are trying to present. And that creates a painful kind of distance, a distance no one else can see. Because on the outside, everything looks normal. You still answer the messages, you still smile, you still show up. But inside, something has changed. You have seen the pattern. And once the mind understands a pattern, it rarely goes back to innocence. This is the hidden cost of understanding too much. It does not always make you louder. Sometimes it makes you quieter. It does not always make you more confident. Sometimes it makes you more careful. It does not always make life easier. Sometimes it makes ordinary life feel emotionally crowded. Because while others are reacting to what happened, you are already thinking about why it happened, where it came from, what it means, and what it will become if nothing changes. And maybe, for a long time, you thought this made you strange. Too sensitive, too intense, too analytical, too hard to satisfy, but maybe the truth is different. Maybe your mind has simply been trying to protect you by understanding the world before it could hurt you. And in the next part, we need to go even deeper. Because understanding too much does not only affect how you see people, it affects how you see yourself. It changes how you handle love, trust, failure, ambition, silence, and even your own identity. So before we continue, take a moment to subscribe to Mind Motive Theory. This channel is for people who do not just want simple answers. It is for people who want to understand the hidden patterns behind human behavior, emotion, and the mind. And if this first part already described something you have carried quietly, write one word in the comments, seen, because sometimes the beginning of healing is realizing that your inner world finally has a name. And when you understand too much, the most difficult person to live with is not always someone else. Sometimes it is yourself. Because the same mind that notices patterns in people also notices patterns inside you, you do not just feel sad. You analyze why the sadness arrived. You do not just make a mistake. You replay the moment, examine your motives, question your judgment, and wonder what that mistake reveals about who you are. You do not simply move through life. You interpret it. And while that can make you wise, sensitive, and deeply self-aware, it can also make your inner world feel like a room where the lights are always on. No silence, no darkness, no place to hide from yourself. This is the sixth struggle, being unable to experience life without analyzing it. Some people enjoy a moment while it is happening. They laugh and simply laugh. They rest and simply rest. They love and simply love. But people who understand too much often stand slightly outside their own experience, watching themselves live it. Even in a happy moment, part of their mind may be asking, why does this feel temporary? Why am I not enjoying this more? What if this changes? What if I lose this? What does this mean about me? And suddenly, the moment is no longer just a moment. It becomes something to decode. This can make joy feel fragile. Not because joy is absent, but because the mind keeps touching it, testing it, questioning it, as if trying to make sure it is real. And the more you analyze a feeling, the harder it becomes to simply feel it. That is why people who understand too much may look calm from the outside, but inside they are constantly translating their own emotions. They are not only living, they are observing themselves living. And that can be exhausting. The seventh struggle is difficulty trusting what feels simple. When your mind is used to complexity, simplicity can feel suspicious. A kind person appears in your life, and instead of receiving their kindness, you wonder what they want. Someone gives you peace, and part of you waits for the hidden cost. A door opens, and instead of walking through it with gratitude, you start scanning for what could go wrong. This is not because you are negative. It is because your mind has learned to survive by noticing what others miss. At some point, maybe understanding became your shield. Maybe you learned early that if you could read the room, you could avoid conflict. If you could predict someone's mood, you could protect yourself. If you could understand why people behaved a certain way, their actions would hurt less. So your mind became sharp, alert, fast, careful. But now, even when life offers something gentle, your mind still treats it like a mystery that must be solved. This is one of the hidden tragedies of people who understand too much. They may deeply desire peace, but they do not always know how to receive it, because peace feels unfamiliar. And what feels unfamiliar can feel unsafe. The eighth struggle is emotional exhaustion from always being the interpreter. In families, friendships, relationships, and even workplaces, perceptive people often become the ones who explain everyone to everyone else. They understand why one person reacted harshly. They understand why another person shut down. They understand why the conflict is not really about the thing everyone is arguing about. They become the emotional translator in the room. The one who can see both sides. The one who says, I think what they really meant was, the one who makes peace, the one who softens tension, the one who absorbs complexity so other people do not have to. And at first, this may feel like a strength. People may even praise you for it. You are mature, you are wise, you are understanding. You are good at reading people. But over time, being the person understands, everyone can become painfully lonely. Because who understands you? Who notices when you are tired of being reasonable? Who sees when you are carrying emotions that were never yours to carry? Who asks whether you want to be the strong one this time? This is why people who understand too much sometimes disappear quietly. They do not always announce their exhaustion. They do not always ask for help. They simply become less available, less expressive, less willing. Not because they stopped caring, but because constantly understanding others without being understood in return can make the soul feel worn down. The ninth struggle is grieving things before they are gone. This is one of the deepest and most private pains. Because when you understand patterns, you often see endings before they arrive. You can feel when a friendship is changing. You can sense when someone's love is becoming colder. You can recognize when a season of life is slowly closing, even while everyone else pretends nothing is different. And so you begin grieving early. You are still present, but part of you is already saying goodbye. You still answer the calls. You still show up. You still act normal. But inside, you can feel the distance growing. This kind of grief is hard to explain because nothing dramatic has happened yet. There is no final conversation. No visible ending. No clear moment where you can say, this is where it broke. But your mind knows, your heart knows, something has shifted. And because you understand too much, you cannot pretend you do not feel it. This can make you seem distant when you are actually hurting. It can make you seem cold when you are actually preparing yourself for loss. It can make you seem detached when, in reality, you have felt the ending coming for a long time. The 10th struggle is the fear of becoming too hard to love. When you see too much, feel too deeply, and think too far ahead, you may begin to wonder if your inner world is too complicated for other people. You may ask yourself, am I too intense? Do I need too much depth? Do I notice too many things? Do I make relationships harder than they need to be? Would people love me more if I were simpler? This fear can make you hide the most honest parts of yourself. You may shrink your thoughts so others do not feel overwhelmed. You may soften your observations so people do not feel exposed. You may pretend to be less affected than you are. You may act easier to love than you actually feel. But the cost of being easy for everyone else is that you may become invisible to yourself, and that is not connection, that is performance. Real connection does not require you to become shallow so someone else can feel comfortable. Real connection gives your depth somewhere safe to land. The truth is, people who understand too much do not need to be fixed for having a deep mind. They need to learn where their understanding belongs. Not every pattern needs your attention. Not every emotion in the room is your responsibility. Not every silence needs to be interpreted. Not every person needs to be understood at the cost of your peace. Sometimes wisdom is not seeing more. Sometimes wisdom is choosing what no longer deserves your emotional energy. Because understanding too much only becomes a prison when you believe you must carry everything you understand. You can notice something and still let it pass. You can understand someone and still have boundaries. You can see a pattern and still choose peace. You can care deeply without becoming responsible for everyone's healing. This is where freedom begins. Not when your mind becomes less perceptive, but when your perception stops controlling your peace. Maybe you were never too sensitive. Maybe you were never too intense. Maybe you were never too complicated. Maybe you were simply aware in places where others were still asleep. But now, the next step is not to keep proving how much you see. The next step is learning how to live without letting everything you see consume you. Because the world does need people who understand deeply. It needs people who can notice pain before it becomes cruelty, patterns before they become destruction, silence before it becomes distance, truth before it becomes too late. But you are not here only to understand the world. You are also here to live in it, to rest, to be loved, to laugh without analyzing the sound of your own happiness, to sit in peace without searching for the hidden threat, to let simple things be simple, to let safe people be safe, to let yourself be human, not just aware. And maybe that is the real lesson. Understanding too much is not the problem. Forgetting how to be present because of what you understand is the problem. So let this be the moment where you stop seeing your mind as a burden. It is not a curse. It is a gift that needs direction, a light that needs rest, a depth that needs boundaries, a sensitivity that needs protection, and a soul that deserves to be understood too. If this message gave words to something you have carried silently, subscribe to Mind Motive Theory. Here, we explore the hidden patterns behind the human mind, the emotions people rarely explain, and the quiet truths that shape who we become. And before you leave, write this in the comments: I understand too much, because sometimes the most powerful moment is not when someone finally explains the world to you. It is when someone finally explains you